Okay, so I mentioned that I don't feel the coach really earned the adulation and the respect of the people in the town as the movie went along. And I'm going to explain why right now. The coach Norman Dale, played by Gene Hackman, is fairly arrogant when he comes in, although he's supposed to be kind of humbled because he's getting a last chance at doing what he loves to do. But it became but they show throughout the entire movie that he's a fish out of water, and he's in a place where essentially things are done a lot differently than what he's used to. And there are constant battles in the first half of the movie between him and the townsfolk who want him to coach a certain way and want to do things a certain way, but he refuses to do. Which, okay, that adds some drama, sure. But the point of having the drama is that when it pays, it's supposed to pay off in the end. But what happens for him to win over, quote unquote, win over the crowd is basically throughout the first half of the film, there is a character named Johnny who is supposed to be probably the best player that town has ever seen. And he doesn't want to play for personal reasons. There's some things going on in his life. Added drama, so that's an interesting dynamic. What happens in the middle of the movie that convinces the townsfolk to stick with Norman is that the player gets, during a meeting where they're deciding to fire the coach, the player comes out of nowhere, talks to the crowd and says, I'm going to come back and play basketball. But if the coach leaves, I'm not coming back. This character had maybe one interaction with the coach, a minor interaction that gave no hint that it had some kind of significance to the character itself, and basically made it seem more of a plot device more than an actual characterization and understanding of how the player felt about the coach, because there was no relationship at all with the coach and the player. So for that player to stick his neck out and say, unless this coach is here, I'm not coming back, it was really weird. It just didn't seem to feel right in the movie. So when that happened, I'm like, but why? There's no reason for you to be attached to this character, and the way that this town treats this specific character, he could have had anything he wanted, and he stuck with him for reasons. I don't get that. I watched that as seeing go on. I'm like, but why? Why would you stick your neck out? That's weird. And it's a plot contrivance. It is the plot. We have an idea of what the plot is going to be, and instead of finding a creative way to make that plot seem natural, we're just sticking to the plot, and that's how it's going to be. And that's kind of that's lazy writing to a certain extent, to have a character that had no attachment to the main character suddenly save this person for no reason whatsoever was very strange in this. And that was one problem I had with, I guess, the coach, quote unquote, winning over the town, because he technically didn't win them over. The kid just hung him out to dry and said, like, if you want me, he has to stay. Oh, why? No reason. What? Like, I don't get that. Like, I just don't get that. And then there is the character that Barbara Hershey played, who is a teacher by the name of Myra Fleener. She is a teacher in the school who essentially in the first scene kind of treated Norman like shit. Like absolute shit. Just like, yeah, you're nothing special. I'm like, okay. So and back to the town meeting. she came to defense for the guy, even for the coach, even though throughout the first half of the film, she didn't like him. Like, she didn't like him at all. And she kept telling him, you need to stay away from Jimmy because he's special and he can do other things aside from basketball. And for her to all of a sudden stick her neck out for this character, again, just like Jimmy, who didn't have that kind of attachment or didn't have that kind of relationship with the character, was again another contrivance. It was just a means to get the plot along. And I watched that and I just kept saying, why? Why do it that way? Why do you have to have this character do this in this way? It felt off to me. With that specifically, with the coach winning over the town, I just did not buy at all. And I just sat there going, that could have been done a lot better. And then let's get back to the teacher. Again, Barbara Hershey puts in a good performance in this movie. But for some reason, she gets romantically entangled with the coach. There is an attachment somewhat in regards to Jimmy, but it was an antagonistic attachment. For them all of a sudden to be romantically interested in each other out of nowhere in the film just seemed really odd. And I just sat there going, why do you need this? There's no reason to have this plotline in there. Now, apparently this is based on a true story. And that may have happened in the actual story of Hoosiers and what these characters are based on. But the movie did a very poor job of showing exactly why these characters are romantically interested in each other, especially Barbara Hershey's character. I watched it. I was like, why are you interested in him? What is your... Okay, sure. Whatever. I'll go along, I guess. And but what I will say though is the shooter, the drunk who becomes the assistant coach, played by Dennis Hopper. I mean, it's a standard drunk who embarrasses himself and embarrasses his kid, and it's a semi-redemption story of him trying to get clean but failing, and then trying to get clean again, and it's fine. It's okay. I enjoyed it more for Hopper's performance than the actual story going through its paces, which, again, is sad. It really shows how good of a performer Dennis Hopper was, to take a character that really isn't that interesting and not that creative and not that dynamic, and make him into a character that you want to watch and that can entertain you, that can actually be of interest to follow to a certain extent. The performances in this film from Gene Hackman, from Dennis Hopper and Barbara Hershey, I think saved the film from being a less than average or just slightly average movie to like a somewhat average movie, or like a somewhat higher than average. I don't know if people just excuse sports films for being this contrived and not being this creative and not being this interesting and having these okay screenplays, which is, I'll push back. There are great movies, the great sports movies that have great writing. Bull Durham is one of them. Tin Cup, White Man Can't Jump, Ron Shelton movies, essentially. Like, they are very good sports movies that deserve some credit for having very good writing and very good characters, especially Bull Durham. Bull Durham's a fantastic movie. But yeah, I just sat here watching the movie and going, if you didn't have these three actors, this movie wouldn't work. It just would not work at all. Which I guess blows my mind that they got these actors in the first place. This is the only movie that Dennis Hopper got an Academy Award nomination for. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. He definitely deserves the recognition for this movie because he took, like I said, he took an average screenplay and I would think is a somewhat forgettable movie and spun it into a great performance. And that deserves recognition to a certain extent. But for him to get nominated for this and not Blue Velvet is weird. And you know who agrees with me? Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper has gone on to say when he got nominated for this film, it's like he's grateful. He was grateful for the nomination, but he thought his performance in Blue Velvet was much better and should have gotten nominated for that. And hey, I got to agree with the guy. That was a fantastic performance. And as good as this is, I mean, I'm glad he got recognized, but it's okay. It's a good performance. It's a very good performance, but it's just not in a great movie. It really isn't. So let's get into final thoughts of the film. This is probably going to upset a few people who think Hoosiers is probably one of the best sports movies of all time. And I'm going to tell you, if this is one of the best sports movies of all time, then we need somebody that is as good as Ron Shelton to make really good sports movies again. Because if this is still considered the best, man, has there not been any improvement. I know that there are other sports movies that have been out recently, like Warrior, that has gotten a lot of praise that people seem to really like. And I might check that out another time. The film is average at best when it comes to writing, plot, and characters. It is only made slightly better by the performance of Gene Hackman, Barbara Hershey, and Dennis Hopper. The direction is standard. It's not that great, and it's for a first-time director at the time, so I kind of get that. So I can kind of excuse that, but for this to be considered one of the best sports movies of all time, I think just goes to show, in my mind, that sports movies need a desperate renaissance in order to get better quality films out there, because there should be something a lot better than this. And I think there are better films than this. Like I mentioned, Bull Durham, White Man Can't Jump, Tin Cup. I would also say He Got Game is a great sports movie, although that's more of a father-son movie than a sports movie. But it has a great performance by an athlete, so okay, we can kind of count that. But in the end, Hoosiers is a decent movie. I will more than likely forget about this movie as soon as I'm done with this review and as soon as I post it and everything. And I guess that's kind of sad. I kind of do get the praise to a certain extent because it has great performances. But for those who are saying, oh, this is like the greatest movie, sports movies of all time, I just have to ask, like, do you guys not want good sports movies? Because if this is considered a great sports movie, I don't know what you're looking for here, because it's all right, but it's not great. So out of 5 stars, I'd give it a 3, like barely a 3. Like, if it weren't for the great performances, it would be a 2. So I'd give it a 3 out of 5 stars. And I think that's kind of generous in this one. So 3 out of 5 stars for Hoosiers. And if you're in the sports movies, you probably have already seen it. But if you haven't, I'd give it a shot. And I would say the performances are worth it. But in the end, I don't think it's something that should be as celebrated as it has been for all this time. I think it's just okay. It's good. It's a good movie. Not great.